Hello, and welcome back to episode 9 of my Stuarts vlogcast. In this episode, I'm hoping to take on the rest of Charles II's reign and look at the reasons that things got increasingly problematic for him. Remember that Charles came back in the Restoration in 1660 with much fanfare and optimism and rejoicing. And I guess at that time, people felt that things were just going to go back to normal. And the problem really was, I suppose at its root, that everybody assumed that their normal was what things were going to return to. And so over the next few years, they put in place the Restoration Settlement, as I outlined last time, and hidden in there were the problems that were going to cause problems later on. In addition, of course, Charles II himself, as I said again last time, is not really perhaps the ideal king that Parliament are looking for. So his character, personality, and in particular his religious affiliations are going to cause problems. What I want to do in this episode is take you through the different themes that you might follow in pursuing an explanation of why Charles II ends up really with problems with Parliament and in a 4-year personal rule at the end of his reign. And those are the common themes that we follow. These are not the only themes, and I'll try and indicate one or two more as we go, but they're quite good themes for us persisting with. So firstly, if we think about money, money was an issue for Charles II because he needed the money, just like his father, and indeed Oliver Cromwell in between, to run the country and also to run his own household. Now, in the Restoration Settlement, Parliament had made allowances for Charles II's money, but the amount that they had projected that they were going to get out of tax is never actually fulfilled. Also, Charles II is quite spends a lot of money and has quite a lavish lifestyle. And he's quite criticised by Parliament for that, and that really undermines his appeals for greater cash. And so you get Charles pursuing a policy which brings cash in. In 1664, for instance, he sold Dunkirk to the French. In 1670, famously, he signed the secret Treaty of Dover. In the secret Treaty of Dover, there was a part of it, a stipulation which said that if and when Charles announced his conversion to Catholicism, the French king would give him enough money to live off so that it would offset his problems with Parliament. You could also see the Dutch Wars, the Second Dutch War of 1665-67, and the Third Dutch War of 72-74 as being primarily about trade. There were other factors, of course, but they are about defeating a trade rival. And the Navigation Acts, which are passed and bring in a lot more tax revenue, are also about money. Charles's aim in this is to try and not be beholden to Parliament for his position. However, it should be said that Parliament met every year except two between 1661 and 1661 to 1678, every year except two, in order to discuss taxation. So whilst money, I think, is one of those underpinning causes of problems, I don't think it's really the driver, and I think if other things could have been solved, then money might not have been such an issue. So, and the big issue that I want to focus on more is about control. And this is our old friend power. In this period, Charles II, during his reign, you really see the emergence of a sort of more parliamentary system of government. And so that starts with the Earl of Clarendon being Charles II's first chief minister. He's chief minister up to 1667, when the Medway disaster in the Second Anglo-Dutch War really undermines his credibility. It is also rumoured that he was not on the best of terms with Charles II because he was quite critical of his promiscuous lifestyle. So, but what I want to suggest actually is that the very existence of these chief ministers sets up a kind of power control rivalry. Even if Charles II is working with the chief minister, Parliament are often working against him, and so you get rivalries building up. Thereafter Clarendon, Charles deliberately doesn't pick a new chief minister and instead employs the cabal, CABAL, which is a group of 5 ministers whom he hoped to kind of play off against each other, that no one of them would grow too powerful. So this is an indication actually that Charles II wants control and is willing to manipulate the system to gain that. Incidentally, those 5 ministers were Clifford, the first C, Arlington, Buckingham, Ashley and Lauderdale. However, it would be fair to say that they're not as powerful as has been portrayed themselves, and eventually they fall from power, not least because Clifford is Catholic and falls foul of the 1673 Test Act. After the fall of the cabal, Charles again reluctantly brings in a chief minister in 1673. He promotes Danby, the Earl Danby, to be Lord Treasurer, and then he promotes him to chief minister in 1675. It's Danby actually who tried to boost his Protestant credentials by getting William of Orange to marry James II, or James the Duke of York's daughter Mary, which of course is very helpful later on. Danby is a schemer and eventually runs into trouble with Parliament in the Popish plot because they accuse him of taking money from the French, which of course he's doing because Charles II is getting money from the French, and he's using that to pursue a pro-Catholic policy, which he's kind of doing because that's what Charles II wants. But you can see here this sort of battle vying for control in the underlying. It's not so much confrontation with Charles II, it's confrontation with his chief ministers, and then occasionally confrontation between Charles II and his chief ministers. Other sort of suggestions that power is a big deal, or control is a big deal in this period are put up by various crises or acts. The Test Act is the first of those in 1673. This is an act which forces anyone who is going to be in public service to take an oath of loyalty to the Church of England, and more to the point, an oath which dismisses the Catholic Church and their traditions as meaningless. No Catholic could take this oath, and Clifford, as I said, resigns from the cabal as a result, and more importantly, James, Duke of York, resigns from his position in the Admiralty. James, Duke of York, of course, Charles II's brother. This is a direct pitch for Parliament saying we are going to control how this works. And that is seen then later on, and even more so, in the Exclusion Crisis, where Parliament tried to block James from ever becoming king. This is not just blocking a Catholic becoming king, which I guess would not be what Charles II's policy would be, but also meddling with the idea of divine right, this idea that James II should be next king because he was born to the position, and that Charles II had no son, and therefore God had ordained somehow that James was the next king. Charles took very great offence to this and fought really hard. This is where you see Charles at his most politically active. He manipulates Parliament, he calls them out to Oxford, he sits in debates, he's willing to veto laws, and really just the whole thing is very much that kind of face-off between king and Parliament that we don't really see in the rest of the reign, and probably haven't seen since Charles I entering Parliament and trying to arrest the 5 MPs. So control is a big deal here, and I think you also see that round the back with Charles II's alliance with the French. Charles II uses the alliance with the French, selling Dunkirk, the secret Treaty of Dover, in order to raise money, in order to assert his independence. And it's through this that after the Exclusion Crisis in 1681, he's able to rule for the last 4 years of his reign without Parliament at all, a short period of personal rule. And this, of course, shows that Charles is now in charge and in power. The third area that you might consider to be the main cause of problems between Parliament and Charles II is, of course, religion. Charles II, his mother, Henrietta Maria, was Catholic. His brother, James, was Catholic. He had spent a lot of time in Catholic countries when he was in exile. And he certainly comes back sympathetic to Catholics and ends up converting to Catholicism on his deathbed. So he clearly has a different religious agenda to Parliament. And that's seen actually, first of all, in the Declarations of Indulgence, both the one in 1662 and the one in 1672, which controversially included Catholics. The one in 1662 was in direct opposition to the Clarendon Code, which Parliament had just passed. In both cases, Charles II is showing that he's more tolerant than Parliament, but Parliament beats him down. Now you can see that as being about control, but also, of course, as being against Charles II's religious policy. However, the fears of Catholicism are the thing that really grow through this period, and a lot of people see them as the cause of the problems between Charles and Parliament. The alliance with the French, selling Dunkirk to them, and then the secret Treaty of Dover, although I always get a little bit confused as to whether people actually knew about the secret Treaty of Dover. If they had, it's certainly true that they would have been massively horrified by it. The Test Act, of course, shows how Catholicism was a big deal in 1673. A lot of people blame Catholics for the Great Fire of London, wrongly of course, but they blame Catholics for the Great Fire of London in 1666, which goes to show how anti-Catholic sentiments were so prominent in Stuart England, Restoration England. And then that, of course, is ignited by the Popish plot, which is completely fabricated by Titus Oates, not taken seriously at the start, but then the mysterious murder of Sir Edmund Berry Godfrey really ignites that, and it ends up causing a huge furore. Several people are killed, hanged for partaking in this plot, which was made up. But the point of it is that it shows how anti-Catholic sentiment was rife in Restoration England, and how anti-Catholic plots were easily believable. This, remember, was a plot to murder Charles II and put James II on the throne. And in response to that, Parliament comes up with the Exclusion Crisis. Now, as I said, you can see that as being about a grab for power and saying we choose who's the next king. But of course, it's also about saying we choose who isn't the next king, and we choose not to have a Catholic king of England. Now that fails, of course, and then finally the the last sort of elements of this is the Rye House Plot in 1683, which is a plot against Charles II because of his pro-Catholic tendencies. It's sort of a Whiggish plot, and again shows how people were willing to act in a desperate way, really, to protect their religion. However, just against the religion idea, it's very easy, I think, to argue this and to see it as being the prominent thing. But remember that in 1685, Charles II dies and James II becomes king. And that is accepted by almost everyone. And I'll talk about that next time. But he, of course, is a publicly and committed Catholic. And so if Catholicism is such a big deal, perhaps we'd expect there to be more opposition to his accession to the throne. And therefore, I would suggest perhaps this idea of control over the king is maybe the bigger cause of the problems, and neither side wanting to be too pragmatic and give away too much of their power, even though both sides are willing to do that a bit. Thanks so much. I hope that makes sense. It's quite a complicated one. Next time will be shorter, I think, and we'll look at James II. See you then.